I had been to the mating auction twice before, and both times I had stood on the block long enough for the auctioneer to clear his throat, apologise to the hall with his eyes, and move on to the next girl. So I knew the shape of the silence before it arrived. I had learned to brace for it the way you brace for cold water. Not because it stops being cold, but because flinching only makes the rest of the room watch you do it. I was 23, a woman grown by every pack law that had ever been read aloud over my head, and old enough to know that the law and the room rarely agreed on what a woman was worth. The law said I could be bid on. The room had already decided I would not be. The scar did that. It ran from the left corner of my jaw, down the side of my throat, pale and ridged, the kind of mark a fire leaves when it has had time to think about it. I had stopped covering it years ago. Covering it had only ever made people more curious about what was underneath. And what was underneath was worse in their imagining than in the cold light of the auction hall, where 100 candles found it and held it up for everyone to see. The hall was the great receiving room of the Iron Court, and it had been built to make small people feel smaller. Black stone, a ceiling lost in smoke and shadow, iron sconces shaped like reaching hands. At the far end, raised on a dais, sat the wolf throne, and on it the Alpha King. I had never seen him before that night. Few of us had. He did not come down among the packs. He ruled the Iron Territories the way winter rules the north, which is to say, completely and from a distance, and without ever once explaining himself. He was not what the stories had made him. The stories made him enormous, a creature half-shifted at all times, teeth and fury. The man on the throne was only a man. Broad through the shoulders, dark-haired, grey threading the dark at his temples, though he could not have been past 35. He sat very still. He had the stillness of someone who had learned that every movement he made would be watched and weighed, and had decided, long ago, to give the watchers nothing. What I noticed, because noticing was the only thing I had ever been good at, was the chair beside him. It was empty. A second seat, smaller than the throne, set at his right hand where a Luna would sit. And over its back, folded with a care that did not match the iron severity of everything else in that room, lay a grey cloak. Wool, by the look of it, worn soft. It was the only thing in the entire hall that looked as though it had ever been touched gently. No one else seemed to see it. I could not stop seeing it. Edlin of the Riverlow pack, the auctioneer read, and I climbed the 3 steps onto the block, and the hall did the thing I knew it would do. It went quiet. Then it began, very softly, to laugh. Not all of it. Laughter in a room like that travels in currents. It started near the front, among the young nobles who had come to bid on the kind of girl who looked good standing behind a chair, and it moved backward through the hall like wind across a field, bending heads together, lifting hands to mouths. A woman near the dais laughed loudest. She was beautiful in the deliberate way of people who have made beauty their whole argument. Gold hair coiled high, a gown the deep red of a wound, a face arranged into delicate amusement. I would learn her name later. Lady Halvaig. That night she was only the loudest voice in a room full of voices, and she said, not quite quietly enough, "Surely they don't expect a bid." The auctioneer cleared his throat. He looked at me with the apology I had seen twice before. He drew the breath that meant he was about to release the hall from the small discomfort of my existence and move on. "The bidding opens at everything." I want to tell you I understood what happened next. I did not. I am still, even now, working it out. The word came from the dais. It came from the Alpha King, who had not moved, whose hands still rested on the arms of the wolf throne, whose face had not changed at all. He had said one word, in a voice that was not loud, and the hall heard it the way you hear a branch break in a silent wood. "Everything," he said again, into the silence his first word had made. "The bid is everything I have. Name a higher one." No one did. You have to understand what that meant. An Alpha King does not bid at a mating auction. He claims. He chooses. The auction was a courtesy the crown extended to the lesser packs, a place for nobles to trade daughters and alliances, and the king attended the way a mountain attends the weather around it, present, indifferent, unmoved. He had never once bid, not for anyone. The beautiful women had been paraded before that throne for years, and the throne had looked at them the way it looked at the wall. And now he had emptied the treasury of his attention onto a scarred omega from a river pack that no one in that room could have found on a map. I looked at him. It was the wrong thing to do. You do not meet the eyes of the Alpha King. Every child of the packs learns that before they learn their own name. But I had spent my whole life being told where not to look, and I was tired, and I looked. He was already looking at me. Not at the scar. I had spent 6 years cataloguing the precise route a stranger's eyes took across my face. The flick to the jaw, the widening, the careful retreat to some safer feature. His eyes did not do that. They had found the scar, yes, but they had not flinched away from it, and they had not lingered on it with the wet curiosity I hated most. They had simply taken it in, the way you take in a thing you already knew was there, and moved on to my eyes, and stayed. I have been looked at as a horror. I have been looked at as a curiosity, a pity, a problem to be moved past. I had never, in 23 years, been looked at as though I were the answer to a question the looker had stopped expecting anyone to answer. It lasted perhaps 3 heartbeats. Then Lady Halvaig rose from her seat in a rustle of wine-dark silk and said, in a voice pitched to carry, "My king, the law requires the bid be verified. A girl of unknown blood cannot simply be claimed. The packs will want assurance she is what she says." And the Alpha King turned his head, slowly, and looked at her the way the throne had always looked at the wall. "Then verify her," he said. "Edelyn of Riverlow comes to the Iron Court. She will be examined by the Crown's own and proven free. Until then, she is under my protection, and the protection of the Crown is not a thing I extend twice." He stood. The whole hall moved, 100 people remembering at once to lower their eyes. "The auction is closed." He came down the steps of the dais. He did not come toward me. He crossed to the small chair at his right hand, and for one moment, before a servant swept forward to gather it, he laid his hand flat on the folded grey cloak draped over its back. Then he was gone through a door behind the throne, and I was standing on the block in a silent hall, and I had no idea, none at all, what had just been bought, or who, or why. I did not sleep that first night in the Iron Court. They gave me a room with a window and a fire and a bed wide enough for 3 of me, and I sat in the chair by the fire until the candle guttered, turning the evening over and over like a stone I was trying to read in the dark. Why me? The question had no flaw to it. I fell through every answer I tried to stand on. Not beauty. Lady Halvaig had been 3 paces away, gold and unmarked. Not blood. I was Riverpack, low and landless. Not pity. I knew pity. I had been raised on it, and what I had seen in his face was not pity. Pity looks away. He had not looked away. If you are still with me, stay a little longer. I promise you the part that comes next is the part I have never been able to explain to anyone, including myself. And if these scattered nights of mine are worth anything to you, you might consider walking the rest of the road with me. I will tell it as true as I can. In the morning, a steward came. He was old, narrow, dry as a reed, and his name was Osric, and he became, though neither of us would have admitted it for weeks, the first friend I made in that place. "The king has instructed that you are to have the freedom of the keep," Osric said, in the tone of a man reading something he privately found absurd. "The library, the gardens, the kitchens, should you wish them. You are not a prisoner." "Then I can leave," I said. He paused. "You can," he allowed. The king was specific. "If you wish to go, a horse and an escort to Rivolo will be provided, and the bid stands forfeit, and no word of reproach will follow you." He looked at me then, properly, and something behind the dryness shifted. "He wished you to know that first, before anything else, that the door is open." I thought about the empty chair, the cloak, the hand laid flat on the wool. "I'll stay," I said. "For now." I did not see the king for 4 days. I saw the shape of him everywhere, in the way the servants moved, the way the court arranged itself around an absence, the way a question would rise in a corridor and die the moment his name entered it. That the man himself stayed behind whatever doors he kept, and I was left to wander a fortress built to make me feel small, refusing, on principle, to feel it. I found the library on the second day. It was the warmest room in the keep, which surprised me. I had expected the cold austerity of the rest, and instead found a low-ceilinged room thick with the smell of old leather and beeswax, a fire kept high, deep chairs worn at the arms. Someone used this room. Someone had made it the one place in that iron house where a body could be at ease. I found the cloak on the third day. It was not in the library. It was in a small side chamber off the great hall, a room with a single chair and a single table, and on the table, a branch of candles always kept lit, and over the chair, the grey wool cloak I had seen at the auction. Up close it was older than I had thought, the hem worn to threads in places, mended once by a hand that had cared more for the keeping than the craft. A woman's cloak, too small for him. I did not touch it, but I stood in the doorway a long while, and I understood that I was standing in the one room in that fortress that meant something, and that I had not been told it existed, and that some part of the king had wanted me to find it on my own, or had not thought to forbid it because he had stopped imagining anyone would come this far down this particular corridor. "That room is not for you." I turned. Lady Halvaig stood at the end of the corridor, gold and unhurried, and the delicate amusement of the auction was gone from her face. What was underneath it was older and colder, and far more interesting. "I wasn't aware any room here was for me," I said. "I was told I had the freedom of the keep." "You were told a great many things, I imagine." She came closer, and the smell of her perfume arrived before she did, something heavy and expensive. "Do you know whose cloak that is?" "No, of course you don't. He didn't tell you. He doesn't tell anyone." She tilted her head. "He hasn't said her name in 9 years. Not once. Not to the council, not to the priests, not to me. And I have been closer to him than you will ever be permitted to stand." He buried it so deep that the whole court agreed to pretend the grave was empty. Her smile returned, thin now. And then you climbed onto a block with a burn on your throat, and he spent his entire fortune in a single word. Do you understand what you are, girl? You are not chosen. You are a wound he is pressing on to see if it still hurts. It was a cruel thing to say, and it was said with great skill. And the worst of it was that I could not be certain she was wrong. What was her name? I asked. Halveig's smile faltered, just slightly, just at one corner. I had asked the question she had built her whole speech to make me afraid to ask, and I had asked it plainly, and it was not the response she had rehearsed. That, she said, recovering, is not a thing you will live long enough in this court to learn. And she turned and went, gold and certain, and left me alone with the candles and the cloak, and a name no one in 9 years had been willing to say. I met him properly that night. I had gone back to the library. It had become my room more than my room had, and he was there, in the deep chair by the fire, a book open and unread on his knee, looking into the flames the way you look at something that is not there. He stood when he saw me. That too was wrong. Alpha Kings do not stand for Riverpack Omegas. I did not know the room was taken, I said. I'll go. Stay. It came out fast, before he had decided to say it. I watched it happen, watched the word leave him a half beat ahead of his own intention, and watched him absorb the fact that he had said it. He gestured, awkwardly, at the other chair. You like this room? It's the only warm one. Yes. Something moved at the edge of his mouth that on another man might have become the beginning of a smile. It always was. I sat. For a while neither of us spoke, and the fire did the work that fires do, and I found that the silence between us was not the bracing silence of the auction hall. It was a silence with room in it. You're wondering why, he said at last to the fire. Everyone's told me their version. Lady Halveig was very thorough this afternoon. His hand tightened on the arm of the chair. What did she tell you? That I'm a wound you're pressing on to see if it still hurts. I kept my voice level. That you haven't said a certain name in 9 years. That I shouldn't go into the room with the cloak. He was quiet a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had gone very careful, each word set down like a man crossing ice. The cloak belonged to my sister. It was not what I had expected, and he saw that it was not, and something in him eased a fraction at having surprised me. Not a lost mate, he said. Everyone assumes a lost mate. It is a tidier grief, and the court prefers tidy things. He turned the unread book over in his hands. My sister was younger than me. When our father died and the territories fractured, there were those who thought a boy king could be unmade if enough of his family died first. There was a fire. His thumb moved along the book's edge. She got the others out. 3 pups and an old woman, out a window, into the snow. She did not get herself out. By the time I reached the room, there was nothing to reach. I did not say I was sorry. People had said they were sorry to me my whole life, and it had never once helped. I said, instead, the true thing. The scar, I said. My hand rose to my throat before I told it to. You looked at it like you knew it. I have spent 9 years, he said, imagining the marks fire leaves. I did not have to imagine yours. He looked at me then, fully, the way he had in the hall. When the auctioneer called your name, and you climbed onto that block, and the whole room did what that room always does. I did not see a girl to be pitied, or claimed, or proven. I saw someone who had walked out of the thing that took her, and was still standing, and had stopped apologising for being alive to do it. His jaw moved once before he found the rest. I have never managed the not apologising. I thought, perhaps, you might teach me how it is done. I have been looked at as a horror and a curiosity and a problem. He had just told me, in the plainest words anyone had ever used with me, that he had bid everything because I had survived, not despite the scar, because of what it meant that I wore it openly. Her name, I said softly. You don't have to say it, but you should be allowed to. 9 years is a long time to hold your breath. He did not say it, but he looked at me as though I had handed him something he had not known he was permitted to want. And across the warm room, the distance between our 2 chairs felt, for the first time, like a thing that might one day be allowed to close. The court noticed before we did. That is the way of courts. They watch the king the way sailors watch the sky, and they had seen the king come to the library 4 nights running, and they had seen the scarred girl come too, and the arithmetic of it ran through the corridors faster than either of us could have stopped it. Lady Helvaig made her second move on the night of the Frost Court, the great winter gathering, the whole nobility of the Iron Territories packed into the Black Hall, and me at the edge of it in a borrowed gown, trying to take up as little of the world as I could. It happened on the gallery stair. I had gone up to escape the press of the hall, to find a window and a breath of cold air, and the stone of the upper gallery was old, and the stair was steep, and when the hand met my back between my shoulders, it did not press. It shoved, hard, a single committed thrust at the top of a long fall. I have fast hands. 6 years of being the one who catches things in a busy Croft kitchen had given me that, if nothing else. My hand found the iron rail and closed on it, and the cold bit and the wrench of my whole weight coming up short tore something in my shoulder, but I did not go down the stair. I hung there, both hands locked on the rail, heart slamming, and when I got my feet back under me and turned, the gallery was empty except for the trailing edge of a wine-dark gown vanishing through a far door. I did not cry out. I want you to know that. I stood on that stair with a wrenched shoulder and a heart trying to climb out of my throat, and I made myself breathe, and I made myself think. And the thought I had was very clear and very cold. She will say I fell. She will say the scarred girl was clumsy on the stairs, and the court will believe it, because the court would rather believe anything than that one of its own had tried to commit murder over a man's attention. So I did not give her a fool to point to. I went back down into the hall. I walked the length of it with my wrenched shoulder held straight and my chin level, and the borrowed gown unmarked. And I went to where the king stood among his council, and into a lull in the talk I said, clearly enough for the nearest dozen to hear, "My king, someone has just tried to put me down the gallery stair, a hand in my back, at the top. I'd have gone the whole way if I were any slower." I held his eyes. I thought you should hear it from me, standing up, rather than from someone else, lying down. The hall went silent, the way it had gone silent at the auction, and the king, who had not in 9 years raised his voice in that hall, who ruled by stillness and distance, went, very quietly, very completely still, in a different way. The kind of stillness that comes before, not after. "Who was near her on the stair?" he said. Not loud. It did not need to be. No one answered, but 100 faces turned, the way faces do, toward the one face that had gone the particular shade of white that guilt goes, and Lady Helvaig stood among the council in her wine-dark gown, and for one instant before she rearranged it, her face told the whole room the truth. "She fell," Helvaig said, The girl is unsteady. Everyone has seen. She is standing, the king said, in front of all of you. Does she look unsteady? He let that sit. You will be confined to your apartments until the Crown's justice has heard this. If she had gone down that stair, Lady Halvaig, I would be holding a different kind of court tonight, and you would not enjoy your place in it. It should have ended there. It did not. Because I had made an error, and the error was thinking the danger was a person, when the danger was a man's 9 years of held breath, and what it would cost to let it out. He came to me after, in the small room with the candles and the cloak. I had gone there without deciding to. My feet had simply taken me. He found me standing where I had stood the first day, an arm's length from his sister's cloak, my wrenched shoulder beginning to stiffen and burn. You're hurt, he said. I've been hurt worse. I'm still standing. Yes. He came into the room, and for a moment he looked not at me, but at the cloak, and I watched the held breath of 9 years rise up in him all at once, the way grief does when something cracks the seal on it. I should send you back to Rivalow, he said, and his voice had gone rough. Tonight, with the horse and the escort and the open door. Halvaig is one of a dozen. They will not stop. I bid everything for you, and the only thing I have actually done is paint a mark on your back for every ambitious house in these territories to aim at. I cannot. His hand had risen toward the cloak and stopped, shaking in the air above it. I could not get her out of that room. I will not stand in another one and fail to get someone out. And there it was, the cost. Not a curse, not magic, just a man who had decided that the safest thing he could do for the people he loved was to let them go before grief could find them, and who was about to do it to me, gently, for my own good, while it tore the heart out of both of us. I could have let him. The open door had been open the whole time. I could have taken the horse and gone back to the Croft kitchen and the laughter I knew the shape of, and been safe, and been small, and spent the rest of my life knowing I had been looked at once as though I were the answer, and had run from the question. Instead, I did the thing that cost me. I crossed the room. He flinched, as though my coming toward him were the dangerous thing, and I took up his sister's cloak from the back of the chair. The pin that held it folded was old iron, worn to a point at one edge, and when my hand closed hard around the wool, it bit into my palm, and I let it, and I held the cloak out between us. Say her name, I said. Edelyn. You got 3 pups and an old woman out a window into the snow. The iron pin had broken my skin. I felt the warmth of it against my fingers and did not loosen my grip. She didn't fail to get out. She chose. She spent herself getting 4 people through a window because that was the last thing she could do. And you have spent 9 years calling her choice your failure. And you have never once said her name out loud, because saying it would mean she was real and not just the wound you keep pressing. My own voice cracked. I let it. I am not going back to Rivalow. I am not a mark on your back. I am standing in front of you with your sister's cloak in my bleeding hand, telling you that you do not get to give me away to keep me safe. Now say her name. Say it. I'll be standing right here when you do. He looked at the cloak. He looked at my hand closed bloody around it. He looked at me. And the held breath of 9 years went out of him, and he said, in a voice I had to lean in to hear, a name. A small, plain, ordinary name, the kind a younger sister has. He said it once, and then he said it again, steadier, and the second time it did not break him. It set something down. I saw it leave his shoulders. I saw 9 years of a man holding a door shut against his own grief, finally, carefully, let the door swing open, and find that what was behind it was not a fire, but a girl who had loved him enough to climb out a window last. He did not reach for me. He reached for the cloak, our hands together on the worn grey wool, my blood on the iron pin, his grief finally with a name to wear. And we stood there a long time, the two of us, holding the one soft thing in that iron house between us, and letting it be held. The kiss came later, and it was not the point, and I will only tell you that when it came, it felt less like a beginning than like the moment a held breath is finally, fully released. That everything in me that had braced for the cold of being unwanted simply, at last, stopped bracing. Lady Halveg did not see another frost court. The Crown's Justice heard the matter, and the gallery stair had been seen after all, by old Osric, who had a steward's habit of being unregarded in corners, and who testified in his dry reed of a voice that he had watched Lady Halveg set her hand between my shoulders and push. She was stripped of her lands and her title, and sent north past the edge of the Iron Territories, to a cold holding where ambition has nothing to climb, and the dozen houses who had thought to aim at the mark on my back watched her go and quietly found other plans. The verification the law required was done, and I was proven free, and the matter of a river pack Omega standing where a Luna stands was settled by the simple fact that the Alpha King had, for the first time in the memory of anyone living, looked at his court and dared it to object. The court, having seen what stillness in him meant, did not. We were claimed in the spring. I will not pretend the whole of the Iron Territories rejoiced. A court does not turn warm in a single season, and there were houses that smiled at me with their mouths and counted my scar with their eyes for a long while after. But the king placed the Luna's circlet on my head himself, in the black hall, in front of all of them, and when he did, he spoke his sister's name aloud as a blessing over the joining. The second time the court had heard it in 9 years. And the first time it had been said as a thing to live beside, rather than a wound to hide. And there was not a sound in that hall but the fire. It is a year now since the auction. The small room off the great hall is still there, and the candles are still kept lit. But the cloak is not over the chair anymore. We moved it. It hangs now in our own chambers, folded with the same care, where I can see it from the bed. Because a thing you love should be kept where the living are, my husband says, and not shut away in a room you visit like a grave. He says her name easily now. He says it the way you say the name of someone who would have liked you. He thinks she would have liked me. I think she would have laughed at him, gently, for taking 9 years to learn what his own wolf knew in a single word across a crowded hall. I still have the scar, of course. Scars do not go anywhere. But I have stopped being able to remember, most days, that it is supposed to be the most interesting thing about me. Because in this house, no one looks at it that way. And you forget, eventually, the shape of a silence you have stopped having to brace for. They laughed when I walked out onto that block. They stopped when he stood up. I have wondered this whole year what the stories will make of it. The Alpha King who spent everything on a scarred girl from a river pack and could not, when pressed, explain why. I could explain it now. But some things are better kept where the living are, and held, and not held up for everyone to see. So I will only tell you this, and then I will let you go. He did not bid on me because I was beautiful, or unmarked, or safe. He bid because I had walked out of the fire and stopped apologizing for it. And the funny thing, the thing I still cannot quite get over, is that all that time, I thought I was the one who had survived something. Tell me, did you see it coming? what the cloak was? Or did you think, like I did, that it was a lost love he was hiding? Stay and tell me in the comments where you are listening from tonight, and what you would have done on that block when the whole room began to laugh. And if her side of the story is the side you want to keep hearing, stay with me. There are more of us than you'd think. The ones who walked out and stopped apologising. I'll keep telling them as long as you keep listening.